This episode of Cider Chat is sponsored by the 3rd Annual New York International Cider Competition, where the judges are retail trade buyers who evaluate commercial ciders based upon category and price point. Submission forms for the February 9th, 2020 competition held in New York City can be found online at nyicidercompetition.com.
Hello, this is Eric Shatt from Redbyrd Orchard Cider, located in Burnett, the Finger Lakes of New York, and you are listening to Cider Chat.
Hello and welcome to Cider Chat. My name is Aria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. This week, we are featuring a chat with Eric Shatt of Redbyrd Orchard Cider, based in Burnett in the Finger Lakes region of New York. That's on the west side of Cayuga Lake. There's going to be more on that chat coming straight up with Eric, but first, a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. Welcome back to all the regular listeners of Cider Chat, and if you are new to this here podcast, well, welcome aboard the cider ride out and about into Ciderville, where the palms are plenty and there's always something to talk about. Lots of different opinions, and in the end, it's all about making some fine quality cider, and in my mind, also saving orchards, which leads us to the new news this week, or additional news. You might have heard that Cider Chat has a cider swag store, and swag is like t-shirts and different things you could wear to kind of celebrate and shout out to other folks. Hey, you know what? I like cider, and this is why. And we have some new offerings at that cider swag store just in time for Black Friday and Cyber Monday and your holiday gift giving season. So I'm going to first hand it over to Perry Pear, who is one of the many talking palms on this here podcast, and allow Perry Pear to tell you about the most recent design that's at the TeePublic Cider Chat swag store waiting for you. Take it away, Perry.
Yes, Rhea, I'm glad we did not wait for this particular new design. It is all about Perry. On the top it says, Save an Orchard. Then there is a nice photograph of pears, and it says below, Drink Perry. Very straightforward, I think.
I think it's a good design, Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Quince. I think so too. Very straightforward. Save an orchard, drink Perry. I don't think there's any more to say about that.
I think you got it, Perry Pear.
So the newest design that Perry was really involved in, it says on the top, Save an Orchard. There's a nice design of a 3 pears together, and then below it says Drink Perry. And I totally agree. It's all about it's not just about drinking a libation just for the pure bliss of drinking it. And of course, there is bliss of drinking Perry or cider. But it also has a real impact on orchards and sometimes one specific tree. So why not think about it in that way? Save an orchard, drink Perry. Save an orchard, drink cider. And so we're going out with that design this week, specifically in kudos to our Perry pears and to all the Perry-loving folk out there.
Yes, I think it's quite nice. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Don't forget the other one, Rhea.
You bet, Medlars. There is another design available at the TeePublic Cider Chat swag store, and that one comes from the We Like Cider song, which is the theme for this here podcast, written by myself and sung by myself and Jay and so many folks around the world. It's one of those kind of like little earwig songs. You can't get it out of your head. But, when it's about cider, and, for us in Ciderville, we don't mind. We don't mind at all, I don't think. Anyways, on the front, it says, There is a reason, and on the back it says, We like cider. And I'm hoping that that will elicit some conversations. What do you mean there is a reason? Well, there's a reason why we do it like this, why we make it this way, why we drink it this way. And there's many different ways to drink cider, whether you are in Bretagne or Brittany in France, where they're drinking out of what looks like a little teacup. That's the style there. Or if you're down in the Spanish regions, or I should just say Asturias or the Basque region, you're going to be doing that high pour. There's a reason why they do it like that. And there's reasons why in the U.S. people are playing with so many different styles of cider. And there's a reason why folks in other parts of the world are making cider the way they do. And I think that's the beauty of cider. And hopefully it will elicit some conversations or just be a fashion statement. It's up to you.
I love it.
So do I, Medlars. And by the way, if you are new to this podcast, the palms that you hear speaking right now, those are the talking palms. And yes, on this podcast, we have palms who talk. And there's going to be another T-shirt just for the talking palms. So you're only going to see it if you go to the TeePublic Cider Chat swag store. Check it out. There's a link in the show notes, or just Google Cider Chat TeePublic, spelled T-E-E public.com, and you can see it there. And definitely get on the sale. It's a good time to get into the cider gifting phase of the year and just to have fun. Get ready for some upcoming fun conferences or cider fests coming your way. When I come right back, we're going to be doing a little bit more news out and about from Ciderville before we go to our main chat with Eric Shatt of Redbyrd Orchard Cider, based in the Finger Lakes region of New York. That is the sound of the turkey. Pretty giant bird if you don't have turkeys in your spot of Ciderville. They are really beautiful creatures, very, very intelligent. And where I live, they are just growing exponentially. You see pretty big flocks crossing the street here and there. Not unusual for me to drive down one stretch of the road and be able to almost be guaranteed that I'm going to be seeing these turkeys on the side of the road, which is kind of interesting because right around the corner is a very large turkey farm. It wasn't until I was able to work at the Diamond Egg Farm, which is based in my spot of Ciderville. This is a family-run operation. The Diamonds, the parents originally had 12 kids, not one set of twins, which is amazing. And I'm going to say, it's been a long time now, they kind of were switching gears, doing some value-added products, and instead of just selling eggs, they started having turkeys and raising turkeys for Thanksgiving and now also for the next holiday season of Christmas. And so for the first 10 years of that operation, I helped them render up the turkeys and got a really amazing insider look to that. And yeah, it's not necessarily for the weak of heart because, it is in all, straight up, it's a slaughterhouse. I mean, you are taking birds and prepping them for folks who really never see that inside workings. But I want to say, from my vantage, there was a really reverence in that setting. And what really amazed me, it wowed me, is how they would bring the young kids in from the family. And, somebody walk in with a kid in their arm. So these kids would be given some, a gizzard to play with or something like that. And I'm not saying play like, being ridiculous, but to experience it. And they didn't make it seem like, ooh, or weirded out. It was just the normal part of life. This was farming life. These are the people who produce so much food for so many people. And I have a deep respect for that. And it taught me, in some ways, it taught me humility, to not be this kind of consumer who is just super disattached from my food and production. And that time, actually, when I started working there, I was a vegetarian. And I'd only have one turkey a year. And now I'm no longer a vegetarian. So it really turned my brain around. So it just goes to show you that, sometimes until you actually kind of walk in that person's footsteps, if you will, or to see how that's being done. And I know it's not done like that everywhere, but at that spot, and I'll put a link in the show notes for these folks. It's a Diamond family based in Wendell, Massachusetts. They really, really showed me a new path. And so thanks for allowing me to go on that little story, John. But it's that time of year. And so this week is Thanksgiving. And as such, I'd like to take this moment right now to give thanks to all the folks who support this here podcast. And this week, there were 2 folks who just came online to the Cider Chat Patreon page, which is a website that helps myself and many content providers keep on producing content, such as Cider Chat. And this note came in from Jim, who is based in Chicago. So let me read a little bit of what he says. Just a quick note of thanks for all your work on Cider Chat. I began listening recently when I decided to pursue the Cider Judge endorsement from the BJCP, which means Beer Judge Certification Program. He is currently a BJCP national judge, and that's for beer. And while he enjoys cider, he didn't know a great deal about it. Cider Chat has been a tremendous resource. Thank you. Well, you're most welcome, Jim. He also goes on, this is a cool thing. I just love how it's kind of we're a small world, all interconnected in cider. He goes on with, I'm also with a partner going through a self-guided intentional process of tasting ciders across a variety of styles, developing our knowledge of styles, palates, and skills in evaluating cider. We're fortunate to have the Northman Bar here in Chicago. Again, thanks for the podcast. So Jim is able to go to the Northman, which is a fantastic cider bar based in Chicago. Another letter came in from a new patron based out in Oakland, and that is Matt. And Matt writes, I've been meaning to join Ciderville for a while, and last night I could not put it off any longer. I love the chats and get so much out of the podcasts, and I often listen to some of them more than once. Right on. I came upon cider making almost by accident, or maybe it called me home. I was going to get some pure glucose for my workout shakes. He was doing some bodybuilding for the past 6 or 7 years. Until you trash both shoulders. Oh dear, Matt, that's awful. And for some reason, I asked Homer, the guy behind the counter, if it was easy to make hard cider. He handed me a recipe, and I bought an airlock and some 118 yeast and a 2-liter jug. And since then, it's been nothing but fun. I found Cider Chat Googling cider podcasts as I was looking for more information on the art and science of making cider. My favorite cider at the moment is wild fermented, dry, and still. And I have some that I've made from apples that I picked from around the neighborhood, with some crabs too. And it came out great. No need to carbonate at all, as I think it would take away from the complexity of this particular batch. Dang, Matt, you are super insightful. That's cool. He goes on with, I also love using both Vosa and Oppskog-Kivik strains from Norway. So these are different yeast strains that he's talking about. It is the opposite from the usual low and slow. So that means those are going to be very fast fermentations. These yeasts go high and fast, yet no off flavors, and the aromatics don't get stripped away. Okay. Maybe we should check them out, eh, Ciderville? He says the fermentation temp ranges between 85 degrees Fahrenheit and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It ages really nice and quite quick, changing day to day. That I'm going to have to look into that, Matt. That would really open up the door for a lot of folks who don't have a cellar and are making cider, maybe like 1-gallon batches in their apartment. So that's a wonderful tip. I'm going to put the names of these 2 yeasts that Matt's talking about in the show notes to this here episode 202 if you want to do a little bit of a hunt on that. And anybody else who has more information about those yeasts, please send it my way and I'll share that with Ciderville. So he goes on with, I'm going to skip ahead. He says, thank you and the talking palms. This is my favorite part. Palms you should be listening to right now. He goes on that his wife loves the talking palms and gets a kick out of them when she hears them in the kitchen while listening and cooking dinner. Thanks for helping cider go up. Best, Matt. Aw. So Matt is based out in Oakland, and we hope to see you at that maybe upcoming CiderCon conference happening in Oakland at the end of January. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to all the patrons of Cider Chat. You help keep this podcast on the air. And thanks to all the commercial makers who are part of the Cider Going Up campaign. It it couldn't be done without your help. And certainly thank you for all the subscribers and regular listeners of this podcast, your ongoing emails and your connection via social media really fills me up and keeps my glass filled. So keep it on, keeping that cider cup flowing, and best wishes to you and yours over this upcoming holiday weekend. And if you're not celebrating Thanksgiving wherever you are in the world, that doesn't mean you can't give thanks for what you have in front of you. And right now, Ciderville is what's in front of me, and because of that, I feel pretty darn inspired, and always feel that my cup is full.
Walking through the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah, Walking in the Orchard, as sung by my cousin Jay. That's a little ditty from the song We Like Cider. And it's a great intro into our featured conversation coming up next year with Eric Shatt of Redbyrd Orchard Cider. This is a small cider scene. It's he and his wife, Deva, and we met at his cider pressing room. He has a classic rack and cloth setup. I'll talk a little bit about that coming up next, because he was in the middle of it when both Kendall Blizzard of Visit Ithaca, who was one of the sponsors and really set up my tour of the Finger Lakes region when we arrived there that morning. And then we're going to leave that cider press room and walk up the hill to a 1-acre orchard. So make sure to grab that glass and join this chat with Eric Shatt of Redbyrd Orchard Cider, based in Burnett, New York. So the setup here for the Redbyrd, their press, let me tell you a little bit about that. And this is what you see for a lot of presses. Apples are heavy, and so when you are bringing them to the press or to the thing that grinds it, or what people also call a scratcher, and you could hear it. It's like pretty darn noisy in the background. So Eric is actually wearing ear protection right now. He just turned it off. You gotta think about how you have it set up. It's really critical so that you are doing the least amount of work for your yield. Every little step counts in cider making. So he has to carry the boxes in, put it on this elevator, and that's like a chain that brings it up, like a little elevator. And then at the top, it's like going through a circular wheel, that classic kind of grinder. And he says there's steel blades on it. I can't see it, so it's in the box. And then all that ground up apple goes into what is called the throat, and that's a wooden box. And all the wood on this press here is oak. That box has a bottom, like a trap door, that can be opened. And so once he does I'm seeing him bring in 2 apple crates, pouring it in. So that's 2 apple crates, fills up what is called the throat, that box. And then after he turns off the scratcher, he opens it and drops it into the rack and cloth, and does this repeatedly. So this is a lot of steps on the way to that perfect glass that we're all waiting for from Redbyrd Cider. A lot of work, a lot of love going into it. On the outside of this building, I'm looking right across the street, and there's a double yellow lane on the road out here, but it's pretty quiet. I haven't seen one car pass since we've been here. This is a Monday morning. Maybe people are at work, I don't know, but it's very rural. We're up high on a sloping hill. There's a red barn with a gray metal roof, and then a lower barn with some cattle, and they look like Holstein cows, actually. Where I am is a board and batten addition. That's where the actual cider press is in. Right next door to a building where it is set up for the actual fermentation. So he has a press in one room that you could hear it again scratching in the background. He has a pump that goes through the window. He takes the windows out between the 2 buildings during this time of year, pumps all the juice into that building, into the tanks, where there's barrels and stainless steel. And that's where the magic continues to happen at Redbyrd Orchard and Cider. Do you want to walk up to the orchard now? Is this a good time? All right, let's do that.
And so this is the old farmhouse. The cidery is right next to it.
Yeah.
And then back behind us is a 1 acre orchard that I planted in between 2004 and 2006. And after we kind of maxed out our land possibilities here, we bought 10 acres close to Trumansburg and planted 4 more acres of orchard. And we currently live there in a house that we built. So we have 2 properties, and this old farmhouse is currently part of an Airbnb side business that we have.
Nice.
Which is great. And we utilize the land for growing apples and grazing sheep. And
So do you get a lot of cider people coming through here? Do they know about it, or?
yeah, it's interesting because we're obviously off the beaten path. I mean, the wine trail is, as the crow flies, probably 5 miles from here, but nobody comes up here because we're up on top of the hill. And
But you're on top of the hill. That's a cool part.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that view.
Yeah. And just this past year, we decided to open the cidery for tastings by appointment only. So it's still very much off the map, off the radar. And you can only taste with Deva and I if we set up an appointment with you. So it's not
Yeah.
open all the time.
Yeah, you better watch out if you open up the cideries, or cider makers, I should say, and they know they're right next to that cider, fermentation room area.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to have me up here.
You drink it all. Yeah.
How old is the house?
Well, the earliest we found it on a map was 1852.
Yeah, I
So
could
it's at
see.
least that old.
Yeah, I mean, look at the roof. You could tell that's like all plank up there.
Yeah, it's
You
cool.
know,
And the
no plywood.
stone foundation around the front of the house, which is the original part, is like 3 feet thick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to bore a hole in it to get water down to the cidery.
Whoa.
And the guy that helped us was like, "Wow, I've never seen a foundation this big before." So
That's how they built it back then.
and there's really big old unhewed timbers in the cellar,
Wow.
so like round logs, and that's a good indicator that dates back prior to even 1800. So either this house was built with recycled lumber, or it maybe was part of an older site, or maybe it actually, the original house is back in the 1700s, which is certainly the oldest in the area. So
And
cool.
how tall is the ceiling in the basement?
I can just barely stand up
Yeah,
straight.
yeah. Start tucking some old,
Yeah.
brandy barrels down there.
I know,
When
I
you get to
know.
that next stage.
Yeah, I know.
You never know. That'd be pretty cool.
It's a great cellar. It stays cool.
I
also.
bet. Yeah.
And actually, we're pretty sure. So that door that goes to the cellar right there.
Oh,
There's a spring here,
wow.
kind of where we're standing in the in the spring. It's really wet right
We're on
here.
a hill. Yeah.
And the stairs that go down into the cellar are these big flagstone
Oh, beautiful.
stairs that go down. And the idea that we think is probably true is that the original spring here was the reason they built the house. And they diverted the spring water into the cellar door, down the stone stairs, and through the cellar floor as a way to cool a root cellar, basically. And possibly even it was used as a creamery, because that's been known to happen around here, is they use the cool spring water to cool cellars for the preserving of cream. So that's kind of a cool...
It certainly is.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I had a similar old house from the 17 something, and big thick stone. It's just it's a treasure.
Yeah.
It's a treasure. It really
Yeah.
is. So cool. Well,
Yeah.
let's go up into the orchard.
Yeah. And I've heard from people that were around here, prior to me, that kind of back here where this woodlot is, there used to be an orchard for the old farm that this was. And I think when I moved here, I did actually see the trunks of those trees before they finally dissolved into the ground.
Look at this. So all these trees were planted in what year?
This tree was planted in 2006.
2006. Yeah.
Some of these other ones were planted, some of these, the first trees up here were planted in 2003.
We're walking. We're kind of like tilting our heads down here. It's kind of a high density orchard here.
Yep. And you can see all the drops on the ground.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful French apple called Nehu, which drops, and I mean, I look at this as this is perfect. It's beautiful, right? It's totally ripe. It's sitting in the grass on the cool ground, and I'm fine with it here as long as the deer and the Rabbits don't get to it. They're fine here for a week, maybe more.
Yeah.
Especially if the weather's cool.
Yeah. It's a good week ahead for that.
Yeah.
Actually, it's nice and cool, not too much intense sun.
Yep.
How about these little apples here? These are
That's a Wixen crab.
Wixen crab.
That's the last thing we pick of all our fruit. We have over 100 varieties, and this is the last apple we pick, and it's probably one of my favorite cider apples.
And what's your date for that when you're picking it?
It's usually the very, very end of October, like Halloween. And then, and that's why I don't go to cider days, because I'm pressing these.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So let's walk down here. So this is the famous Kingston Black.
Yeah.
And
One, two tree. No, yeah,
there's actually four of them here. And,
Okay.
And these are on M7 rootstock. And if you're knowledgeable about orchard horticulture, M7 is it was a really popular common rootstock developed in England, and it's known for being overproductive. The tree, not the apple, the tree being overproductive. So it produces too much vigor, hard to manage, hard to prune. But on this site, like I mentioned, on a hilltop, we have very kind of shallow soils, right? So the bedrock, the hard pan is not far below us. And this is what you learn, right? So 13 years later, I look at this Kingston Black, which is a vigorous variety, on a vigorous rootstock, M7, and to me that's the perfect tree. So it took 13 years to get there, right? And if I was planting more fruit trees on this site, I would plant more M7, and I would probably plant more Kingston Black M7, because it's perfect. It's beautiful. The fruit is fantastic. It's got tons of flavor and character. The fruit's not overly sized. It's not like full of water. It's not diluted. It's full of flavor.
Yeah.
And it's just what the cider maker wants.
No doubt. And are you finding, is this biannual or is
It's
it?
definitely biennial.
Yep. Okay.
And I've come to just accept that with a lot of variety. A lot of the best cider apples, they just are biennial, and you take the crop when you got it, and when you don't have it, then you just have a year off. Lucky you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You might be happy about that. Are you doing any kind of like nutrient addition here in any way, or management?
Yep, it's a super low management orchard, and that's really kind of my goal. So this, I don't know if, so we're certified biodynamic. So this orchard and our other 4 acres in Burnett, or in Trumansburg, is certified biodynamic by Demeter. We apply the biodynamic preps. We do very minimal organic management of insects and other bacteria and fungal pathogens. And the only fertilizer these trees have got in the last probably 7 or 8 years is biodynamically prepped compost from our sheep.
And where are the sheep kept?
Well, this year we actually kept them all in Trumansburg
All right.
at our other site, other farm. But normally they're here too. We usually split the flock up.
Do you put them in the orchard then?
We do like late in the year and really early in the year.
What kind of sheep?
Katahdins.
Katahdins?
Yeah, it's a hair sheep.
Do they debark the trees?
If you leave them in here too long, they will. And that's the trick. So the other thing we do is we raise geese and ducks, and they're like the perfect orchard animal because they never bother the tree. But sheep, like if I put the sheep in here right now, they would certainly eat the apple drops, which would be a problem. But they would love this green grass, and they would browse it, and they'd just wander around. And then after they ate all the choicest stuff, all this nice soft grass, they would start to like browse the apple tree leaves that they could reach, and then after they finished that and they started to get bored, then they'd start rubbing on the bark of the tree, and before you know it, they'd start peeling the bark off, and they love how sweet I think the sap is from from the apple trees.
Yeah.
So, and that's one project that I've thought about so much, is like this orchard is almost old enough and big enough that I could cut the lower limbs off all these trees, protect the trunk with some sort of metal cage, and then graze the sheep in here freely, certain times of the year, and not worry about them destroying the tree. So these are Asian pears, and I actually did a top graft here of a peri pear. So I have some peri pears out at our farm in Trumansburg, And so, I love the Asian pears to eat, but I love a couple of these different Perry pears that I've growing in Trumansburg. And so had this nice big water spout growing up this tree, I think 2 years ago, and I made the graft right here.
Yeah,
So
look at that. Came out really good.
This is the Perry pear. And so
going straight up off the tree.
And so
the Asian pear.
Probably this year when I prune this tree, I'll cut more of this Asian pear back, and over the next 2 to 3 years, I'll eventually end up with just this. And actually, this tree here is a perfect example of a graft that I did probably 10 years ago. And so this is...
What kind of graft did you use there, just so folks would know?
Like a cleft graft.
Cleft graft. So you're kind of cutting into the cambium layer. And did you put a couple grafts in there, and then you pulled off the one that was like, you left on the one that was doing the best?
Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes if it's
great. Look at that. I mean, that's like, just so folks know, again, so there's one like off shot of a branch coming here, and this graft is just
obvious. It's obvious, right?
But it's exquisite. I mean, you did a nice job there. It's such a perfect continuation. And you see this like definitive line.
In
that this is what I'll see over in Europe like this. This kind of like graft lines, and that person's really skilled. So kudos to you, man.
Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's a really nice graft line.
It's amazing. And over here,
so we're walking up the hills. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of apples, and in an area, it's. How long is this here, Eric? What would you say?
75 feet.
75 feet, and just really high density, small trees. They're not really tall, so they're easy to harvest, no doubt. Yeah.
And this is so kind of what I was saying earlier. So this is your Arlington Mill on MM111. That's Burnett on MM111, and MM111 is a big tree, and these were planted in 2004. And again, kind of going back to the site, like this soil is not a vigorous orchard soil. It's not a vigorous soil for anything. If you're planting corn or whatever, it's just not a real fertile soil. And that is exceptional soil to grow cider fruit. It's also exceptional soil to grow a vineyard because for a lot of reasons, but the main thing is the fruit character and quality is superior. The yield is lower, but the quality is superior. And so if you can get past the economics, which sometimes, will drive you crazy, you really do get this superior fruit. And that's something that, to me, is so obvious. I worked in the wine industry here in the Finger Lakes for 9 years and worked with Herman Weimer Vineyard and Ventosa Vineyards. And growing fruit specifically for alcoholic fermentation is a really fascinating thing because what you do in the vineyard or the orchard is so influential on the character of the fruit, and then it's magnified when that fruit is produced into a beverage. Absolutely. And that's to me, that's like, I love that. Yeah,
you're containing it on this like beautiful sloping hill, on the side of like Cayuga Lake or north of Cayuga Lake.
Yeah, we're kind of like on the top. So Seneca to the west and Cayuga to the east.
What is the weather like here? Is it kind of temperate because of the lake effect? Is there a lake effect? Do they call it that?
There is a lake effect, and it's really apparent in the late winter because we get these snowfalls that come off of a prevailing northwest wind off of Seneca Lake, and it just dumps on this hill. And sometimes I remember my middle son Leo. He was born on April 4th. And the day after he was born, 14 inches of snow, boom, and it just came right off the lake.
Wow!
So it's unique that way, and I think that we get.
He must have a strong, constitution. That guy. Being born on that kind of day.
That describes him perfectly.
Good for him.
Yeah. No, and we have. It's also really cool. So we're at 1,600 feet elevation here, which is kind of the top-ish of the hills. Like the highest hills around here are 2,000 feet. And it's really interesting. It can be at my other farm in Trumansburg, which is at 1,100 feet elevation. It can be 0 there, and it can be 5 above, 7 above here. And you would think the opposite because we're higher elevation, but it has to do with the fact that the cold air sinks into the valleys, and the warmth from the earth kind of percolates up, and it slightly heats the hilltop. So it's really kind of an interesting microclimate, and that makes this a great orchard site. Like, I've had spring freeze outs and blossom loss in Trumansburg at my farm, and not here.
Oh, interesting, huh? Yeah,
But again,
because of the location.
Because of the location. But again, it's also not a productive soil.
Yeah.
So nobody would buy 10, 20 acres here and plant a bunch of Honeycrisp and think they could be profitable.
But perfect for what you're doing.
Great for cider, yeah.
Dang, man, that's yeah. Isn't that fantastic? Cider's going to save the world.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And you know, the other thing that's great, I think is great, is you go back like 50, 60, 70 years, and all these small farms in this area had a small orchard just like this, 1 acre, you know, and it was for their, storing in their root cellar. It was for making cider. It was for making pies. And all those orchards are gone because of the way ag has changed. And it's basically the economy. Like the economy of being in farming is horrible. And you have to be big, or you have to be really small to kind of make it. And so,
or have a good value-added product.
Yeah.
Like cider.
Yep.
Where,
Totally.
Yeah, you could get, yeah.
And I think
Hopefully, that's the goal.
And I think that the cider revival is hopefully going to bring back these small orchards, because there's a purpose for it, right?
Without a doubt.
There's a market for it. There's a demand for it.
And if you have not only good apples, but good quality cider making techniques,
Yeah.
that changes the
It
paradigm
does.
too. And
does.
that's what we're seeing. It's really switching. And somebody from your background in the wine.
Yep.
So do you consider a cider a wine?
I do. I wouldn't call it a wine, because wine is from grapes, cider is from apples.
Yeah.
But it's if there was one word that could describe both of them together, that would make sense to me. Like, it's the same thing, it's just different fruit. To me, all the cider is really I guess you could say it's a offshoot of wine. It's a category of wine.
Yeah. So what are we standing next to here?
So this is Ashmead's Kernel, which is, I love developing a list of the apples that year after year, in any conditions, with any season, thrive, from a cider perspective. And I love developing that list and changing it and maintaining it. And Ashmead's Kernel is for sure on that list. And this year we had a really wet spring and summer, so one of the challenges was leaf pathogens that have defoliated some varieties to this point in the season because of that. But as you'll see, Ashmead's here is looking great.
Really good. Yeah. Very sizable. Yeah.
Great apples. Lots of apples. Again, this is M7.
M7.
So
Okay.
I love that rootstock on this site.
Good. Well, that's knowing it, and your work with Cornell. How much has that informed you? Like, if you came into cider at this, without that, what would it be like for you?
Yeah, so it's been I've worked at Cornell as the research farm manager for the Ithaca-based orchard and vineyard. I'm in my 9th season there, which is crazy.
Wow.
But that's been an incredible experience, because working close to the research projects and programs, in that aspect of fruit growing, the folks that are doing research there are the pinnacle of what they're focused on, what their projects are, and what their expertise. And so kind of just being there and seeing that has been great. The other thing that working at Cornell has really been helpful for me is just really, in a lot of respects, has been delving into the reality of growing apples. Like, what does it mean to be a commercial apple grower, and just the day-to-day and what you have to do and what you have to watch out for. And so it's been really valuable that way. And I think when I planted this orchard, like I said, I did a lot of semi-dwarfs. My new orchard in Trumansburg is a lot of dwarfs, tightly spaced, like 3 feet. So it's more kind of what we call like really high density orchard, tall spindle with a real focus on production or yield per acre. And so that is great too, and I learned a lot of that by working at Cornell. It's a different mindset in orcharding. I do think you can get really fantastic cider fruit growing that way, but it's a very different mindset than this freestanding large semi-dwarf tree that is less productive, but for sure less maintenance and less upfront cost. So getting back to Cornell, I think that really kind of just seeing multiple perspectives on growing apples is really, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it gives you the ability to like hit the ground running coming into this at a level that a lot of people are just catching up to. I mean, 9 years in that's a lot of having a huge base, a foundation. And also the people that kind of touchstone too with, where to get that answer. And that's a big part of it, isn't it? Knowing where to get the answer. Because there's a lot to it.
Totally.
Even though it's really simple, it's a simple process, press, juice, ferment. But getting it from, this level is really, really something.
A friend of mine who worked in the grape industry for a while, and he's a farmer, he once said to me that knowing what it is supposed to look like is such a valuable thing. And I always think about that, because you could be doing anything and just kind of blindly hoping to succeed. But if you've seen, experienced, or been involved in a successful whatever it is, having that knowledge is really important, because then you can stray from it. You can go in different directions and try new things and be an adventurer in that regard. But always knowing kind of the base, is a valuable aspect.
I mean, in that case, you're talking about knowing and seeing like the production piece of growing. So then would you say for actually making the cider, knowing what to taste?
That's totally, really that's another thing.
Important.
That's another thing.
And equally important. You can't just do it based off that one cider that you had, unless it was, most fantastic thing, made you drop to your knees. Then go for it.
Right. But again, on the same regard, like some of these very inexperienced young new cider makers or winemakers that are just kind of throwing themselves into it, doing it whatever they feel they should do, that's a great way to discover new things too, because you're not like pigeonholed into any kind of tradition. You're not like so you can, from that aspect, from that perspective, you can also pave new grounds.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said.
And I think that's a cool thing about the cider industry right now, is that there's people in both category. So
especially in the U.S., I think that's where that model that you're talking about is so wide open. Like in no other part of the world, the U.S. is really leading that for that classic entrepreneurial style that Americans are so well known for, and being kind of wild west no matter where we are. It's great.
It is great. And I think that's what's cool about not being I think that's one benefit that has come from this generation gap in cider making in North America, right? Is that we lost a lot by not having it continual to now, but now that we're rebuilding it, we're like able to do whatever we want. We're not trying to replicate anything.
So we're walking down the hill now, looking over the fence.
Here, but first I want to so you can see these young trees I planted here. I planted these. I planted these this spring, and this is again my attempt at sheep protecting young trees. So these trees are planted between basically two fences side by side. And as you can see, I didn't get to putting the sheep in this pasture this summer at all. But I figured by planting these young trees, putting a fence on either side, and there's actually 2 rows, I can still put my sheep in this pasture, and hopefully they won't bother the trees.
Yeah. And are you using locusts? Is that locust there?
There's no locust,
Yeah, for the fencing, for the posts. Cool.
And all those trees that we see are an apple that I discovered in the wild called Gnarled Chapman, which I had a nursery graft for me 100 trees.
Yeah,
And this
yeah.
is one of them right
I was
here,
wondering about the Gnarled Chapman.
Yeah.
So this is some scion that you actually then sell, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I want to show you. I want to
and
show you a mature one.
a Searsburg.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's definitely this like side project of mine that, and actually, so it all started. Actually, everything about cider for me started with this orchard that was just up the road here. It's not there anymore, but it was an old abandoned orchard, and there were all these wild seedling trees that were growing in the hedgerows around this old orchard. And so, you know, I used to go up there and just pick apples and press them, and this was like back in 2003 and 4, and make this cider, and I was always really blown away by the quality of the cider. So here we have an example. These are 2 trees that are Gnarled Chapman that I grafted in 2008. We got the apples on the tree here. I've got a bunch more of these planted.
So the graft is down there?
Graft is way down
Yeah,
here.
way down there. It's like a bulb.
Yep.
And that was on what did you graft that on?
This is on bud 9.
Okay.
So these trees that are really closely spaced here, these 2 rows, is what you would consider more of like a tall spindle, high density, 4 feet between trees, and these are on bud 9 rootstock.
And so this is a Gnarled Chapman, and you just fell in love with it.
I did. I totally found it up the road.
I'm looking for one
and
on the ground, but I'm not seeing
It's not
it.
ripe yet.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you can try it.
Yeah, yeah.
Feel free to try it.
All right,
It's
I'm
usually
gonna-
a late October ripening apple.
All right. I'm going to pull this little bugger off here.
Yeah. I think you might be able to taste the tannins at this point.
There we go.
It has a slight russet, right?
Yeah, it does. It's beautiful.
Nice pink blush.
Yeah.
And, you know, like the mature apple has a really cool shape, I think. I like the kind of squat.
Oh, no wonder you grafted this
Yeah.
for cider. Holy smokes.
And it hasn't fully developed yet. It's still underripe, but
You
it's
could just
sweet.
imagine.
And there's tannins, which the one thing that's really interesting to me about this apple is that so many of the apples that we find in the wild around here are very sharp. And that's
Wow.
great, but this one isn't.
Yeah.
And it's also a big apple. So it has size and has tannins, lots of sugar. And the biggest reason is it's really disease resistant. So that was really kind of the whole reason for scavenging the wild for these seedling trees that are thriving under no management and producing lots of really good cider apples, and then cultivating them into an orchard setting, seeing how they behave, and further evaluating them. And the hope is that this apple and others like this become well-known, great, you know,
Could see it.
grown apples that that add to the portfolio of apple varieties for cider makers. And I think that's happening because Fedco Trees is grafting and selling this apple, Indian Creek Farm, and I just love the fact that it's out there. And
Did that start from you, Eric?
it started from me.
From Fedco, going to Fedco, John Bunker.
John Bunker, I know
and
John.
then
he,
who doesn't adore John?
yeah, he wanted me to send him actually a few. I talked about it a few times with him, and he wanted me to send him some apples, and I did. And he took it to Cider Days and included it in an apple tasting event there. And, you know, it's funny because I sent him the apple, and he instantly wrote me back and said, "This is the most beautiful apple I've ever seen." He was like blown away by the visuals, right? Which is something that we don't often talk about. You know, we love all these things about apples, but the visual aspect is also a really valuable. You know, it gives us happiness, right? Like
Exactly.
So he was really excited about that, and then when he tasted it, he was equally excited about the flavor and the cider potential, and I'm still incredibly excited about it, and I think that there's tons of these potential varieties out there all over the East Coast, probably the West Coast too. And,
Definitely.
And we need to, and they're all individuals, so we need to save them when we can find them.
Yeah, the time is now for that.
Yeah.
The cider hunt apple is on. Yeah, what I find is so incredible about it is that, you know, this has stood the test of time in these like conditions and the climate changing, and it's whatever reason, maybe morph is the wrong word, but it has acclimated itself to those conditions, and you discover it and find it. It's like it's just been waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
Sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
And what about the name? Can you just talk about that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're obviously going to like, John Chapman.
Yep.
Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah. So the Chapman part of the name comes from it's a reference or a tribute to Johnny Appleseed. The gnarled word in the name goes back to the way the original mother tree looked, and it was this gnarly tree, and it was very craggly and sort of growing and strained. It was kind of squat and had these like long-reaching branches. And I think it was that way because either the deer, for whatever reason, continued to browse it, or maybe the top fell off at some point. I'm not sure. But it was a very unique shape, and that was what originally attracted me to it. And then I noticed the green foliage and how clean it was, and I liked that.
Really beautiful.
And then I remember just like looking around. I was like, well, where are the apples? Where are the apples? And I remember just distinctly seeing one beautiful orb hanging from this one branch. And I tasted it, and I was like, freaking out. Yeah. So,
wow.
But the funny thing is now that I've grafted it numerous times and planted in the orchard, it does not have that gnarled character to the tree structure. So, and that I think goes back to just the influence of rootstocks on trees, and so the seedling version of Gnarled Chapman is a very gnarly tree, or maybe it was something else, environmental impact, but growing this tree on normal cultivated rootstocks produces kind of a pretty vigorous upright tree, not super grower friendly, but
because
it doesn't naturally form the shape of a tree that orchardists strive to form. Like we talk about this like Christmas tree shape.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit like a pear tree shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you're finding across the board?
A great description. Yeah, it's very much pear-like. And so it works if you...
Like Christmas tree, just for folks who are wondering what we're talking about. So it is like a Christmas tree kind of form, and which is what pears do. And you have that one straight, trunk going up. I'm wondering, when you found the original, what was the setting around like there? Was it in the field by a house side, or...
Yeah, it was basically an abandoned probably an abandoned field that was grazed. So
there you go, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe that's what formed the tree, were cows,
Yeah. That's a great name, because to me the gnarl piece is like that it hung out like for so long, just waiting for Eric to come through, and that's what John said to
John
me.
Bugger.
He said, don't give up on trees. Oftentimes they're just sitting kind of dormant, under vines and stuff, just waiting to be discovered. And I'm so glad you did. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Treasure.
It is a treasure.
What a nice contribution to the cider in the U.S. that you're doing here.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed my walkabout with Eric on that kind of semi-rainy day up in the orchard, and just hearing him talk and his passion and his knowledge, just super overflowing. I particularly liked when he said that the visual aspect of the apple gives us happiness. And no doubt about that, Eric. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it also, once again, speaks true to the cider. Not the visual aspect, but the happiness piece. If you have a happy cider maker, a person who kind of embraces life like Eric and Deva, his partner, does, then shoot, you're going to have some amazing cider coming out of that. And in fact, they do, no doubt. They have a number of ciders that you could check out, and they're available both online, so you could go to a link in the show notes to get their cider online. And here's a couple other places I'm going to just talk about, like in New York. These are kind of well-known places. The Brooklyn Cider House, you have a good chance of getting it there. The Gramercy Tavern, Murray's Cheese Bar, that's a cool place to check out too. The Vinegar Hill House, I haven't been there yet, but that sounds really neat. And Slope Cellars in Brooklyn. And then also just around the Finger Lakes area, you could go to the Cellar Door, which has a really nice selection of ciders both locally and further afield. The Finger Lakes Beverage Center, I went there shopping before I headed out of town to get some ciders. And there's also, again, Hazelnut's Kitchen, where I was able to attend a cider dinner. Eric was sitting next to me. Across from me was Deva, and just this really nice group of people. There's also going to be a show, and there's also a photo in the show notes of our dinner table that evening. Yeah, really, really outstanding. Really nicely paired with the following ciders from Redbyrd. They had the 2018 Rosé, the Workman Semi-Dry, Star Blossom, and then the main entree was the Cloud Splitter, which is a traditional cider. That's like a cork and cage. Check it out. Don't hesitate. This is really to put on your to-do list. Go to Hazelnut Kitchen. Make that one of your destinations while you're hanging out in the area in the Finger Lakes. And before I roll out of here, I'm going to just do this one little final mini clip, which I think had a lot of value in it, on Eric talking about being a small two-person operation. Let's go to that next.
I don't know if we want to delve into economics or not, but like, to me, like small scale, and then you're super small, like my wife Deva and I, we do everything. Or once you like get a little bigger, then you have to get a lot bigger to make it work, you know? So there's like this really small model that works, and then there's like a middle ground model, and then obviously there's these massive, operations. So a lot of people we know in the Finger Lakes are in that middle ground model, which is great, working for them, perfect. But I love the simplicity of this super small model, two-person operation. We have our hands in everything, which is overwhelming at times, but it's also great because, when you grow the fruit and pick the fruit, you know everything about the fruit, you know the best place to put it and how to blend it. And then when it comes to bottling, you know where that fruit came from. So it's like, it's just really, for me, it's really kind of almost liberating to be a part of the entire circle.
A big thanks to Visit Ithaca, South Hill Cider, Finger Lakes Cider House, Black Diamond Cider, Bellwether Hard Cider and Wine, and Redbyrd Orchard and Cider for hosting me during the Finger Lakes Cider Week in September of 2019, so that I could then record these amazing conversations in a territory in the U.S. that's really popping for cider. What else can I say? You listen to Eric, and if that doesn't make you thirsty, I don't know what would. And thank goodness I have a bottle of this Cloud Splitter traditional cider in front of me. It's going to be getting cracked open on Thanksgiving, along with some other beautiful ciders that I'll be bringing to the table this year. I hope you will be doing the same too, wherever you are. Shoot, if you don't live in the U.S., you could still celebrate, cider every single day. We don't need a turkey reason to do that now, do we? Oh, yeah. And I'd also like to put out the following reminder to all of us that the New York International Cider Competition is coming up in February. You want to get your submissions in now. It's a cool competition because how often do you have only like retail people? Now, they might not be that like high-level cider judge, but they're the folks who have it out on the market. And that is the audience you want to get out in front of when you're trying to move your cider out beyond your typical boundaries. So check that out. That's nyicidercompetition.com. And while you're online, remember, now's the time to do some gift giving. And who doesn't like to get some cider swag? You could go to the Cider Chat swag store at TeePublic and start getting that, Save an Orchard, Drink Perry, and cider going up. It's all good news, and it helps keep this podcast rolling out these type of episodes to you. This is Rhea Windcaller, signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like palms. We love orchards. And having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh, yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Yes, there is a reason why we do it like this. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like palms. We like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There's a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh, yeah.
We like cider.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like palm.
Oh, yes, we do.
We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. Walking down the orchards, dancing in the street, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. We like palm.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like orchards.
Yes, we do.
Having some fun.